Welcome to the College Checklist podcast by March Consulting College Planners and Higher Scores Test Prep, where we attempt to make the confusing chaos of the college admissions process more simple. As we work through this current era of testing and admissions, we are bringing you a new guide to this admission season with all new hosts, experts, and guests. So I am Julia, as always, your host and test prep expert. For this episode today, I'm very excited to talk about the thing that most students and families are most concerned about when it comes to college, how expensive college is. And it seems to just keep climbing every single year, and the price tags seem so astronomical that many families are starting to wonder if college is worth the cost. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so I've brought on a very special guest to help me talk through what students and their families can be doing to make super informed financial decisions about their college future. Please welcome Peg Keough, the Director of Education at College Aid Pro.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Happy to be here.
So what do you do specifically, and what does College Aid Pro do in general?
Yeah. So, as the director of education, I'm involved in all kind of being the head person for our staff around education, around everything, around college financial planning, all these crazy new FAFSA changes, the whole revamping of that. So I do that for our staff. Also, we have a team of experts that I've helped to build from all over the country that support families. So I coach them and educate them on all different things in the process. So that's a big part of my role, and doing things like this and educating families. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what I love. Used to be a teacher way back when. So that's what I do. And then CAP in general, College Aid Pro in general, like our mission is to eliminate the student debt crisis by empowering families to shop smarter for college. And these kind of events, educating families, we educate families, then we have, state of the art software to help them understand financial aid and where they fit. And we have the education that goes with the software. And then we also have ways to support them if needed. If they're DIYers, they can be off to the races with our software and all of our free resources. So, I mean, really at CAP, we partner with high schools so we can support the counselors and professionals in this space that like you that know about test prep, and that's one of the pieces. Affordability is one of the pieces. Admission into colleges, there's all these different pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we partner with people to support them, because this piece, it's pretty heavy, and unless you really want to stay on top of it and own it like I do, it's a lot to take. So yeah, that's what we do at CAP. Our goal is to kind of be the household name when it comes to college affordability. And to your point, I mean, colleges are costing over $100,000 a year now, and it's scary. But colleges are all discounting, so does that really matter? It really doesn't. But if you don't understand that, it's very, very scary. So
yeah, just like buy a house or a car every year of your
depending on where you live. And you have 3 kids, so that's 12 times. Yeah, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, speaking of it being a lot, I think for a lot of students and their families, it can feel like kind of they're going in blind. Like they've heard that you can do better on a certain application to potentially get more merit aid in the future, but like they don't know, or like maybe they need a sports scholarship. Like there's just a lot of families kind of go into application season not really knowing. I mean, where do you even find the information that you might need in order to make informed decisions? Like where does that start?
Yeah.
How do they research college costs?
Yeah, so when it comes to affordability, it's actually better to start early, first of all.
Mm,
So even if you have a sophomore in high school, it's not too early to start figuring this out. And I'm not here to just promote College A Pro, but we do have free software and you can go
mhm,
in there and plug in because there's something called the Student Aid Index, used to be called an expected family contribution. That's the
mm,
first thing. You've got to understand what that is. And there's two different ones through two different financial aid forms. You have to understand what that is. And then you have to start looking at the colleges that your child's interested in. And people will say, well, sophomore year, I have no idea. That's fine. But even if you can start playing around with the different colleges and saying, what, why does that college look like that? Because as I said earlier, all these colleges, that $100,000 price tag, it really sounds funny. It sounds counterintuitive. It really doesn't matter. It's irrelevant because all the colleges are discounting their
mhm,
sticker price, if you will. The main
mm,
thing is how do they discount? And will my family, based on our finances or based on our child and their grades and test scores, and like you said, athletics, talent, will we get those discounts? And in some schools, certain parents, certain kids will get a lot of discount. And in another school, they won't get any discount. And that's
mm.
what families don't know. And so I use the term drift. They kind of drift. That's why I started my business years ago before I joined CAP, because I was like, wow, these families are really, they're not understanding it. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. And that's where you got to start. There are calculators out there that do this. Some of them are good, some of them aren't so good. The colleges have what's called a net price calculator. Again, some of them are great and some of them really aren't good. So that's really why we created our software to create a place for families to put in their information and start understanding just their family and where they fit in financial aid.
Yeah, so the different pieces that you need, right? You need the like sticker price, as you call it, of the college, right? You need family income in and sort of the whole financial package, right? If you have multiple students in college, I know that makes a big difference.
At some
Uh,
schools, yep.
at some schools, yeah. So you need that kind of picture in order to put together what your family is expected to contribute. And then there's also the merit based level. And then there's also just how, as you were saying, different colleges, each student will get different packages at different colleges. So there are is there a way to tell whether if a college is more likely to be more generous? Like is there a way to find that information?
Yeah, the colleges self-report as far as the need. They self-report different pieces of information. So on the need-based side, they will self-report, hey, on average, and that's important, we meet this much of need. Say it's 90%. And then on average of that 90% is with the free money, like institutional grants, like from their
Mm,
endowment money. Now, I always tell families that's an average. So you want to get in the ballpark, but it's never going to be an exact science necessarily. And then, same thing for merit. Like you
mm,
can go online and find, hey, this is the percent of students that receive non need based aid. That's an important statistic, but along with it, you also need to know what's the average merit because there are schools in this country that just offer no merit. That's the first piece, like the Ivies of the world and Stanford, MIT. Like there's just no child walking on those campuses with a merit scholarship. So if your kid is 1600 SATs, 4.0 unweighted GPA, that's lovely. That's going to open a lot of doors, but it's not going to get you merit aid at Harvard because they just don't do that,
mm,
right?
mhm,
But those are key stats, and there are different places on the web. We have all that in our software, and we build it into our net cost projections. The colleges, like they report that, and then different websites. I haven't been on these sites in a while, but College Data used to have that. CollegeData.com used to have those stats. But those are the two key pieces of information.
Mm,
But then it's like, okay, well, this school does offer merit, but does that matter for my child? Like, are their stats good enough to get merit?
mhm,
Because they all differ.
mhm,
Some schools, every kid is offered merit that's accepted, all the way to schools that only offer merit to the top 5% that year of the kids that apply and get accepted. So it's very competitive down to automatic ones, or every child is awarded it. So what's helpful is to get that all together. I
mm,
mentioned before net price calculators that colleges were told, forced, I guess, by the federal government to have this years and years ago. The
mhm,
problem is they have to have it, but it doesn't need to be updated. There's no body
mhm,
that oversees them to make sure they're still accurate. And we've done analysis of our software versus the MPCs, and usually we're more correct. It's
mhm.
not something that I think the colleges really wanted to do, because there
Yeah.
isn't a lot of transparency, especially at some schools, of like how much is going to cost my family. And so
Mhm,
that's nice for the colleges. It's terrible for families. And when families go on college tours, these colleges will say things that are accurate for some families, but they're not accurate for others. Like, hey, the average family gets this. And people say, well, okay, they cost 80. If average family is getting a big discount of 30, I think I can handle it. But their family is not, because of XYZ reason. So they
mhm,
don't finish the sentence sometimes, or
mhm,
if your income's here, but they don't say, but if you have significant assets, that changes the game. So the colleges are very slick marketing machines, and they know what
mhm,
they're doing. And so it's really hard for families to understand that. And so it's really important that they do homework ahead of time. Even, I hate to say, even before you start doing really serious college visits. Like, if you're on vacation and you have a freshman, sure, walk on a campus, see what your child says about it. But when you're really going and doing tours, junior year, senior year, you want to make sure you understand how that college is going to look at you from an affordability standpoint. And then you can actually talk to the Office of Admissions. You can talk to the Office of Financial Aid and ask really good questions to get an even better feel. But if you don't really understand how they do all this, you don't know the questions to ask. So
mhm.
your kids and potentially the parents are falling in love with schools that I sometimes tell people, you're shopping for Maseratis, and they laugh, but I tell them I'm really not kidding, right? I mean, I don't go to the Maserati dealership. I'm assuming you don't, Julia, when you need a new car, because we just know we can't afford that, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of families are doing that and they just don't know. And then they'll say, well, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. And that's virtually impossible for most families when you're looking at a 90, $100,000 school, even 70, 60. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, with higher scores test prep, with our longer courses, we offer a little add-on course that for free that's just teaching you kind of the basics of how to do this stuff on your own. So, and how to use your test scores to figure out financial aid. So, net price calculators, but again, the ones on the school websites are hit or miss.
A lot of them don't show merit either, because they were really originally created to project need-based aid. So some of them project merit, and a lot of times it's a range. Like, it'll say you're
Mhm,
eligible for 10,000 to 25,000.
mhm,
Well, that's a big
right.
range.
That's a big difference for most people. Um, yeah, federal student aid estimators. We use College Navigator for university data, but again, it's a lot of really good data, but it is averaged. It is general.
Yeah, I would interject, like,
Hmm.
depends on the kind of school too. Like, private
Mm,
schools, easier to project. Like, state schools, you could have $40,000 of need at UC Berkeley as an out-of-state kid. I'm outside of Seattle as a Washington kid. They're
mm,
not going to meet any of that need. But if you get into something that's just a calculator, like an Excel spreadsheet with formulas, and says, "Oh, you have 40,000 of need. We meet 70. Multiply, multiply." And you're going to get numbers that I can tell you just from years in the business, like you're not going to get anything. You're going to get subsidized loans from the federal government, 3,500 freshman year. But the name of the game is getting endowment money, getting that institutional money, and you're not going to get it from a UC school if you're an out of state kid. Other state schools, you might get
Mhm.
some really nice merit as an out of state kid. So there's just all these nuances that just
Mhm.
looking up the numbers, but not understanding, I like to call it the college's business plans.
Mhm.
Literally, they care about is net revenue. And they know some kids are going to be almost get a full ride up to the families that are going to write a full check and pay all of it and everything in between. And they very seriously track yields around all of the different net revenue points and how much they need coming in. I mean, it's a big business at these schools, these enrollment management departments.
Yeah. So for right now, right? Because that is this is coming out in November, right? Second week of November. So we are right in application season. We are right in the thick of it for most families. So what can they and should they be doing right now in order to submit for need-based aid? Let's start there.
Right. All right. So let's start with the CSS profile.
Okay.
If your child has schools that require that, that's a second form, about 200 schools, mostly private. You're going to submit that along with the FAFSA. I'll talk about the FAFSA in a minute because the
Mm,
FAFSA is a little delayed this year. The CSS profile went live October 1. So you want to be looking up ASAP if your child has CSS profile schools on their list, what the deadline is to submit that. Because if you're eligible for need based aid and you miss that deadline, you could be giving the colleges a chance to give you tens of thousands of dollars less of aid. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to leave money on the table. So find out what that priority deadline is and make sure you're meeting it. So it could be November 15th. It's tied to how your child is applying for admission. So if they're
mm,
applying regular decision, that's your latest deadlines for everything. But early action, there's early action deadlines that are like now. So like
mhm.
as you said, Julia, like it's game time, right? So
Yeah.
you want to look up those deadlines and get that form in. It's through College Board. So it's cssprofile.collegeboard.org. It's the 25-26 school year. And you're logging in with your child's College Board credentials. Their email address is the username, their password. Almost every student has that because they've taken the PSAT, SAT, AP classes, whatever it is. That's all College Board. So you want to get in there and get that done ASAP, meet that deadline. The FAFSA is the other form that most schools only use the FAFSA. Then these about 200 use both. They use the CSS to give out their endowment money, their institutional aid. That's why it's so important to get that in on time. The FAFSA, this is the second year of the new rollout. And normally it goes live October 1, but this year they are going live. The language that the Department of Ed has used is BY, December 1st. So that means could it be earlier? Maybe.
Mm,
Kind of depends. And they're doing 4 different beta rollouts. So they're started with a really small number of community-based organizations bringing in like literally hundreds of students, very small numbers. They're running it through, letting them submit their FAFSAs to the colleges and really watching for the tech glitches because last year the
mm,
tech glitches were rampant. And so they got a lot of feedback from the big shots in higher ed, NACAC, and NCAM, like, hey guys, don't go live October 1 if you're not ready. So I think they listened and said, all right, we're going to do it as we get those glitches. Then we're going to have thousands in beta 2 and beta 3 will be up to tens of thousands of students. So hopefully, fingers crossed, by December 1, I know,
mhm,
everybody cross your fingers.
mm,
It will be able to go live with, nothing seamless with tech. There's always something, but minimal issues. I mean, they were still back in the beginning of October, they were still fixing tech glitches from the 24-25 school year that kids are in college now. So
Wow.
they're doing a lot. There's a lot going on. So I'm really hoping that we can go live December 1. The one thing you can do if you're not part of any of these beta groups for FAFSA is get what's called your Federal Student Aid ID, FSA ID. You want
Mhm.
to Google it. You're going to be on a studentaid.gov site. And that's important because you're going to put in your social security number and your date of birth. So if there's a copycat site, you don't want to be, you want to make sure you're on the government site because with all the identity theft going around. And basically, the student needs one. That's how they're going to sign into their FAFSA. That's the only way to get in. So you create a username and password. They get your social, your date of birth. You create security questions, and then that gets sent off to the Social Security Administration. They check you are who you are. It takes a few days. You get an approval, and you're good to go. Don't wait to do that until close to December because then it takes longer and then people have deadlines and they're waiting. Their FSA IDs haven't been approved, and it just creates a lot of stress. So just trust me, go ahead and do that now. Get it done. Every student needs it, like I said. If parents are married, only one parent needs to get it. If they're married, filing jointly, if that's how they file their taxes. If you're divorced or separated, only the custodial parent submits the FAFSA. The other parent is not involved, and the custodial parent is defined as the parent that provided the most financial support on a year look back from literally when the family submits the form. So, say it's December 10th, it's a year look back from December 10th. So I work with a lot of families where the financial support is almost even. So that's a gray area. That's a planning opportunity where you can figure out if you can make it work between the exes, which parent is the most advantageous to be the custodial parent and have that parent spend, you can literally, it can be $1 more. I'm providing more support on a year look back. Let me pay for that soccer uniform, whatever it happens to be to make it unbalanced. And then that custodial parent will submit the FAFSA, and that custodial parent will get the FSA ID. The other parent is not involved, and so there's no FSA ID there. So, in most, that covers most families, the divorced and separated, married, filing jointly. If you happen to be married, and for whatever reason you file your taxes married filing separately, and that will make sense to you if you're listening and you do that, then both parents need to get an FSA ID. That's a specific case. And the reason, what happens when you're in the FAFSA is you're going to be required to consent to move your IRS, your income information directly into the student's FAFSA. And so that's why if you're married filing separately, you both need it because you have different tax returns. But that's a new change. If any older parents are listening that have kids in college before 24, 25, you used to have the choice to manually enter that. That's gone. So it should, in theory, make it easier for people. It moves right in, it populates. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be stressed about the income part of the FAFSA. But that is the one thing that you can do right now. Just get it done. And then if you happen to get reached out to by a community based organization or one of my experts on our team just reached out and said, hey, Peg, he's in Kentucky and the Kentucky Higher Ed Association was reaching out. So that means they're part of a beta and they're reaching out to students saying, hey, do you want to be a part of this beta and submit your FAFSA? So but most families, it's going to probably be around December 1.
In terms of merit-based aid, right? The school's merit-based aid is sort of decided in conjunction with admission, correct? So they use the same information that you use to get into the school to determine merit-based aid, as well as if there's any additional scholarships they'd like you to apply for,
Mhm.
which scholarships almost always require a separate application, even if it's through the school, but they will request, like, hey, would you like to apply for this? All of that is through your application. So, all of the same advice that we've been giving this entire season about how to make your application really strong all applies for merit-based aid as well, right? You want to make sure you have a cohesive and compelling story that sort of represents all of you over the course of your entire application. You want to make sure that your essay demonstrates that you're thoughtful, that you have leadership qualities, that it represents like authenticity of who you are. You know, test scores if you need to improve or complement your grades in any way, just to make sure that you are presenting a complete picture.
Yeah, yeah, I 100%, I 100% agree. Some of the merit awards at colleges, as long as you submit your admission app by a certain date, you're automatically considered. And that's
Mhm.
awesome. Like December 1 is a big date for a lot of schools. But then to your point, Julia, that same school might have other ones where it's like, hey, if this requires an interview, this requires an extra essay. And so it's really important to be on top of all that, especially if you're a family that well, I'm not going to get any need based aid, but this school, my child is eligible for merit, and this school
Mhm.
does provide merit. That that could be, a massive discount for you, even more than need based aid for a lot of families. And what's
Yeah.
wonderful about merit aid is most of the time you got to read the small print. Sometimes it's very obvious. It's almost always provided for 4 years,
Mhm.
as long as the student maintains a certain GPA and it's not a 4.0. You don't have to be like on Dean's list. They just want to make sure that the student is doing well academically,
Yeah.
that's receiving the merit aid. But to your point, Office of Admissions offers that, and they are just starting that discounting process. They don't really know a lot of times about your ability to pay, and honestly, they don't care. They're like, we want this
Mhm.
kid. We want to start enticing this family by offering discounts. Maybe they love it when families make decisions early, right? They love somebody to say in February or March, we're coming, here's the deposit check, because they have their yield targets. And, if they can, oh, that's another one, that's great for them, right? And so
Mhm.
they know they're doing it through need based and merit based aid. But yeah, and it's every school is a little bit different how they do the merit. I mean, some schools have automatic merit, which is really nice. At University of Alabama, you look on their website, it's like, you have this ACT score, you get this. That's very, very transparent. And then some are competitive, the other extreme, and it really depends on the kids you're competing against in a given year,
Mhm.
if they're looking at grades and test scores.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why, like, researching the specific universities and getting that as specific of data as possible, and then, like, if they don't provide it, asking those questions directly to admissions officers if you can, of, like, figuring out exactly what could be available to your student if they applied there and did well, because there's really such a wide variety of what could be available. It's not every single school does it so differently.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep. And another great resource is that with my two, they routinely knew the admissions rep that covered our area, because that
mm,
person is very aligned with the student. Like, their job is to get all these kids to come to that university. So they're a really good resource throughout the process. Like, hey,
mhm,
I know I'm eligible for merit. What about this versus this? Do you think so? They always got to know that person. I know they travel and speak at sometimes they'll speak like at the Marriott, and they'll do a road show with three other colleges. All that stuff is really important to attend, get to know that person, show demonstrated interest. But if they come to the high school, that's big. Like, that is worth leaving that class, getting a pass or whatever they call it nowadays, and going and meeting that person and asking them your specific questions, to your point, Julia, about you, and get their feedback. Because the more data you can understand about the given colleges, the better.
yeah. So to sort of in our final section, I'd love to share a couple common beliefs that I see with students, and I'm wondering if you could respond to them as an expert.
Sure.
So, myth number one: college is always going to cost too much, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, that's like we're saying here, that's just absolutely wrong. When I do presentations, I have a slide that shows a state school here that costs 35,000 and a private school in Washington that costs almost 77, and I show parents 35 versus 77. When that student got their package, it was actually 35, same price for the state school, but it had dropped to 40 with the discounts. And that doesn't include loans. So it's absolutely not the case. You just have to understand how that school discounts, and does that discounting work for your family? It might not. Other schools might fit perfectly with your family. So yeah, and it's easy to look at a sticker price and multiply it by 4 in your head and say, no way, that's off the list. But you don't want to do that because the colleges are it really is irrelevant. You really have to dig to know what your family's cost is going to be, or at least get in the ballpark of what your family's cost is going to be.
Yeah, okay, so in that similar vein, myth number 2, I won't get any financial aid because my family makes too much.
Yeah, this is a big one, and I've heard it from the beginning of doing this decades ago. And most of the time, people say that because their friends or their family or their neighbor told them. And I
Mhm.
always tell people friends and family and neighbors are lovely, but in this process, don't get advice from that unless
Yeah.
you're literally going to sit down at your kitchen table and say, okay, let's compare our tax returns and all of
Mhm.
our assets and exactly who our kids are, exactly their leadership, their grades, their test scores, their whole history. Did they have issues during COVID? Do they have this? I'm joking, right? Nobody's going to do that. Unless you're going to do that, don't take advice from friends and family because you literally could be leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table. Like, talk to somebody who's been around the block who understands this and get advice from them. Like, people don't talk to their neighbor about how should I effectively file my tax return. They go to a CPA, or
Yeah.
they use TurboTax. We always say college aid pro is kind of the TurboTax of preparing for college affordability, to
Mhm.
finding good net cost colleges. So please don't go from what somebody told you or some article you read that gave generalities, because it just really depends on the family and the school.
Uh, okay, myth number 3. My student has to be a perfect student and cure cancer and be a star football player in order to get merit aid.
Yeah, yeah. This one I always joke and say you have to be a super kid, and all the
Mhm.
things you just described, Julia. Again, totally not true. There are colleges in this country that every student that gets accepted gets a discount of some sort. Every student. And it doesn't mean they're terrible schools. I know kids that go to these schools and they're thriving after college, great careers, making nice money, very happy contributors to society. It's just not the case. Most I my daughter, I have twins. She had like a 3.6. Nowadays, that's kind of crummy. Unweighted 3.6. It's
Mhm.
way above average, but there's so much pressure on kids to be these super kids, and it's really they should just be who they are, in my opinion. 3.6,
Mhm.
okay, test scores. I mean, she applied to 10 schools. None of them were the Ivies. That didn't make sense for what she wanted to study. She got into all of them and she got tons of merit at a lot of them. Their merit aid is a way that colleges discount their cost for affluent families a lot of times that maybe even could pay full price, but they don't care because, again, they want that net revenue. Like, if they're projecting we have so many kids that are going to pay, the parents are going to pay 55, but we cost 75, they're planning on that. So a family that maybe won't get need-based aid can afford 55, and they might even be able to afford 75, but Office of Admissions is going to say, hey, we want this kid, we're discounting. This is how it goes. So you don't need to have a super kid to
Yeah.
get money. It's just not the case on the merit side.
But what I'm also hearing is that you need to be willing to research a wide variety of types of schools in a wide variety of places because there is so much variety. So if you have your heart set on brown, like you might not be able to get the financial aid package of your dreams. But if you're willing to look around and find something that's actually the best fit for you financially, you'll be much more successful
Yeah, yeah,
with what I'm
yeah.
hearing.
And sometimes people are, they I don't know how, I don't want to be blunt, but sometimes people are shopping for brand. They're buying
Yes.
like a brown. It's a brand, right? And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that that's categorically wrong. Every family's different. Every student's different. What their aspirations are post college, what they want to do, what they want to study, everybody's different. But if I make a generalization, buying brand for a lot of families can be really expensive. And that might not be the best fit for that child, for that student, for that person to
Yeah.
really thrive. With my two, I was very focused on where they were going to thrive, not the rankings. I actually don't like rankings at all, most
No.
rankings, because some of the most popular rankings, if you looked at how they get to that ranking, it's stuff that as a parent you could care less about, right? And it's,
Yeah.
oh, they're so highly ranked. And a lot of the more selective schools can be they can be pressure cookers, right? And is that the right environment for your child? Is that where your child's going to excel? There's just a lot of pieces there that it's just important for them to find the right environment, because every college offers a lot, but the student, just like everything in life, you got to go after things. So you've got to get involved. You've got to approach professors. And just because you're at Princeton doesn't mean you just sit back and, okay, my life's,
Mhm.
done. I'm at Princeton. I'm set for life. Absolutely not. It's just
Mhm.
not the case. You still have to go after it. And that name, once you get out and you're applying for jobs, it's helpful the first time. A lot of schools have strong alumni networks, not just the Ivies. But after a
Mhm.
while, it's what you're doing in your career. You can't live on that legacy forever. And then those schools are great fits for certain kids, but not for every kid. And I always tell parents, if your child's applying to three of these, like I had a counselor a while ago tell me, these schools are wild cards for every child. To your point, I could tell you stories about kids that started businesses that had $500,000 and they didn't get into these schools.
Mhm.
So it's very subjective, and it shouldn't be taken personally, and it never should be thought of as I'm a failure because I didn't get into XYZ school. I'm just a firm believer
Totally.
as a parent and a professional. The kids they end up where they belong, and hopefully and where they're going to thrive. And that's how they're going to be happy, healthy adults.
Mhm.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah. And then very last thing quickly, final myth number 4. I won't be able to afford college even with financial aid. So what's the point?
Well, I would say you got to figure that out first. That may or may not be true.
Mhm.
It's not necessary. You might find a bunch of schools and say none of these are affordable. All right, well then let's look at other schools. There's other strategies. There's 2 years of community college, or maybe even 1 year of community college. Some kids go abroad. Honestly, I had a family years ago. She went to school in Australia, and I'm good friends with the mom, worked with both of the kids, and she's like, it was way cheaper, even getting her back and forth and paying for housing. I think she was in Sydney or Melbourne
Mhm.
than here. So there's different ways to approach it too.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to think in possibility and be creative. That's why my point that I made earlier, the earlier you start, the better. The earlier you start to understand the finances. If you're a family, typically you have a certain income, you have a certain assets. Sometimes people are in sales and their income is really variable. But a lot of people are like, yeah, we're pretty steady Eddie. You can figure out, like, understand financial aid, the need base now, even though your child's a sophomore. And Julia, like, you're a test prep, like, maybe merit's the name of the game. And if you can see, oh, my child did well on a practice ACT, got a 30. If you get a 31 at XYZ school, that's another 7,000 a year. Well, that's
Mhm.
28,000 in your pocket. All these, then it could be affordable, where, like, the myth you're saying, it wasn't.
Mhm.
So the earlier you start, the better. I think a lot of people think about it senior year, which is
Mhm.
way better than not thinking about it. But the earlier the better to start
Yeah.
thinking and then setting expectations, because Most families can find affordable schools. It might not be exactly the path that's the dream, but that might be the path that they have to, go on.
Yeah. And from the test prep perspective, starting early is really crucial also so that you can try and do well on the PSAT as well, because that is a really great path to scholarships of all
Yeah,
sorts.
national merit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
National merit, and there's a huge list of sort of College Board affiliated scholarships that you apply to with the PSAT as well. So even if you don't quite make the PSAT cutoff or the national merit cutoff, there are a lot of options with that. But you gotta be thinking about that end of sophomore year, so that you can start preparing for the PSAT. So yeah, this is all incredible information. And if people would like to learn more or get started with that free version of College Aid Pro, where can they find you guys? All of this will be linked below.
yeah. Our website is collegeaidpro.com. Super easy to remember. It's chock full of free resources, and on there's a lot of places where it says get started, and that'll take you. The exact URL to set up a free account is mycap, because that's what we call the software, .collegeaidpro.com. But that's where I strongly recommend you start. Plug in 3 schools. A lot of the data that Julie and I have been talking about today, it's all in there. It's at your fingertips. Do they require the CSS profile? How much need do they meet? What's the average merit scholarship? What percent of kids get it? We have a merit scholarship database in there. So you can see the different scholarships. So it's really jam packed, and there's a lot more in there to take you along the journey as well. But that at least gets you started, and then you can look at affordability in 4 years and a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. And we'll link their social media and everything as well.
Yeah, we
Um,
do free webinars all the time, educational webinars. So if you get in our ecosystem, we'll invite you to those, and we'll guide you along this process, because we know the journey that families are on, and so we educate you along that process, so it's not so overwhelming. As each thing comes up, like financial aid forms, what are they? How do you fill them out? We hit each step in the process.
yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this,
Oh,
and all the incredible information you've provided. If you would like to contact me, you can send an email to hello@higherscorestestprep.com, and you can check out our website to get that Cash for College course that I mentioned as well, where we do link to the College Aid Pro free version. If you would like to follow that very indirect path to their services. That is all for now. Please reach out to either Peg or me with any questions you might have, because I know we're both here to help everyone with this sort of chaos. We've got one more episode this season, and then we will be taking a break for the holidays as all of the applications go in and you all sit with bated breath. So thanks for listening, and we will see you in the new year.
bye bye, everybody.